late tonight, huh? Good evening. Welcome to the meeting. This is the August 6th meeting of the Milton Board of Selectmen. I'm going to call this meeting to order. I just want to, I've just arrived back in town, so for my colleagues and those here, I've been gone since Friday, but I want to just give a quick shout out. This weekend, many people know, is the Pan Massachusetts Challenge. Over 6,300 riders that rode 192 miles, which will raise $52 million for Dana-Farber Cancer Institute this year. But we had about 30-something Milton residents who participated. This is something that I've been fortunate to, I was asked by my wife, who's ridden for many years, to get involved in the public safety aspect of this, and this was my 11th year, and I really want to give a shout out to 3,500 volunteers support this ride. And if you saw the weather this weekend, it was not a pretty day on Saturday. It actually went from hot and sunny to torrential rain, and it just took a lot. But there were several residents of this town that work this as volunteers every year, and I want to thank them very much as well. That was quite an effort by thousands of people. It's quite a thing to see, to move on all back roads from Sturbridge. If you ever said to someone from either Sturbridge or Wellesley, how do you feel like riding your bike to Provincetown? They'd probably look at you like you had two heads, but many people do, and cancer is something that continues to afflict all of us in this world, and I just want to congratulate and thank all of them again on behalf of everyone at PMC. Okay, so jumping right in, item number 2, review and approval of minutes. Can I have a motion on, are we all right first on all the dates that are highlighted here? Are there any here that we need to omit tonight? Are we okay? Madam Secretary, you sure?
Yes.
Okay, so can I get a motion on the minutes outlined here in item 2, please?
I'll move to, yeah, sure. I'll move to approve the meeting minutes from, do we want to do them en masse, all at once? Just do them all at once? Okay.
Yeah.
To approve the meeting minutes from May 14th, 2018, May 29th, 2018, June 11th, 2018, June 21st, 2018, June 25th, 2018, June 28th, 2018, July 5th, 2018, July 9th, 2018, and July 23rd, 2018, as written.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Go ahead.
Oh, I think we just had a few little tweaks.
Yes.
So we might want
With
to just say
minor
as
edits.
amended
Yeah.
with minor edits.
And you have
Because
them,
I had a
okay.
few tweaks, and I know Katie did as well.
I'll take that as a friendly amendment. That okay? Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Okay, confirm future meeting dates. This is a meeting that wasn't regularly on the agenda, but, and I thank you all for taking the time to come here tonight. I know, who's away next week?
I am.
So we have a meeting scheduled for the 13th of August and the 27th of August. Are we okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. Citizens speak. I just need to remind anyone as they approach to speak to please state their name, and we'll have a sign-in sheet if there's anyone here to speak to citizens speak. I think I've met you
Good
before.
evening. My name is Betty White, and I live at 36 Ridge Road.
Pull the mic up close when you
Okay.
speak, please.
And I'm here to speak about the issue of changing the board name. Personally, I was really surprised to see the reluctance to change it. I thought it seemed like a simple moving the Milton into the 21st century move. I was surprised at people's discussion, and so even though I listened to the meeting twice on tape, and I just wanted to talk about a couple of the comments that were made about the traditions. I mean, certainly I know that the tradition was that the board was called Selectmen, and I understand that some traditions can be lovely, but other traditions can be divisive and they can exclude people. And I want to point to a tradition that the town had for many years when the town meeting used to be on a Saturday and the town elections used to be on a Saturday. And back in 1994, when I was on the warrant committee, myself and my friend and colleague on the warrant committee, Ronit Voigt, sponsored a citizen's petition with 8 other signatures to change the town meeting away from the Jewish Sabbath so that everybody who would like to participate fully in town government, whether it be to run for office, to be a town meeting member, would not feel any conflict about participating on a Saturday. And, you know, I think that We had to push really hard about that. We had to call everybody on town meeting at that time. We had to, include lots of discussions with a lot of people who had some concerns, but we did it because it was the right thing to do. And, a lot of people pushed back and said, well, there aren't that many Jewish people living in Milton anymore, and, if they really wanted to, they could participate. But, there was a woman named, for many of you who've been in town a long time, remember Kathy Heffernan, who got up and spoke about, well, how come we never have meetings on Sundays then, if that be the case? And that was like one of the most poignant moments of the discussion. Anyway, it passed unanimously in town meeting, and since that time, the number of Jewish people who are town meeting members who are on boards and committees has increased significantly, and I think that, that's a really important thing. So again, a tradition that served most people pretty well, but didn't serve everyone very well, and so I think of the language change in the same vein, so that's what I wanted to say tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think if town meeting was still on Saturdays, would be until July. If it were still on Saturday, would town meeting would last until July, the way it goes today. Good evening, Kathy.
Good
The
evening.
floor is yours.
Kathleen Potter, 69 St. Mary's Road, and I also rise to address the gender inclusiveness of the name change. And I don't think we're following a trend. I think we are trend setting. The time is now. The sound of it is cumbersome. I know we all love our words, and it's cumbersome because we're not used to hearing it. I'm sure there was a time in America when people said, United States of America, that sounds so wrong. Well, now it sounds very natural, and select board will become natural to our offspring, and to future, our entire future, and that's my little bit of a statement. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kathleen. Anyone else? Hearing none, we will move to item 5, followed by item 8, and I believe Ms. Collins will be recusing
I'll be recused.
herself. Oh, come on up, Chase. I'm sorry. We're going to welcome DPW Director Chase Berkeley. Hardworking
Nice to
DPW.
see everybody. Chase Berkeley, DPW Director.
Good evening.
So what you have before you on item 5 is the final approval step for monies that are allotted to the town through the MWRA local financial assistance program for both our water program and our sewer. So on the water side, these are amounts that were approved at previous town meetings, 2014, 15, and 16. And on the sewer, it was approved at annual town meeting 2017. So this is just the final approval that the bond council needs to execute the loan, and then we will receive payment in late August. So as far as the water money, that project's underway already right now. We're replacing Antwerp Street's water main and several other streets around there, Berlin, Emerson, Cedar Terrace. And then the sewer program is more of a systematic by tributary area in the sewer system, so it follows the pipes, and what that does is seek out any place that rainwater works its way into the sewer system, and then we put out a contract the following year after we find it to correct it. So that program is a 3/4 grant, and 1/4 the cost is paid by the town, so that's a really great one to take advantage of, and the town has been for several years, and it's put us in very good shape. Our sewer system is in very good shape as of late, so. Happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Oh, good.
Can I just ask
Go ahead.
Um,
Absolutely.
And so this is the interest-free loan that we get from the MWRA?
Correct, so
Okay.
both water and sewer are interest-free, and on the sewer, it's 3/4 grant.
Three-quarter,
Yeah.
okay, great.
On the, I knew it was the interest rate. What's the length of the?
It's a 10-year, so
Okay.
they allot in amounts, so $5 million was allotted to the town
Right.
over a 10-year period, so you'll notice at all the previous town meetings, $500,000 is authorized annually, and then we basically wait for a contract size. Usually they're about $1 million to $2 million, so we execute several years authorizations at once to pay off that contract.
Okay. Motion?
I'll
Can I have
move-
a motion?
Sure.
Okay.
I'll move to approve an application for a $228,500 sewer bond to be issued in August 2018.
Second.
Any discussion?
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And just show that Ms. Conlon abstained. recused herself. Let's go to item 8, which is the approval on the useful life of assets. And this is to, I'll let you speak to this as well if you want. You already?
Actually, this comes from the treasurer, Mr. Chair, from
Anyone
Mr.
else?
McAuliffe.
I'll take anyone's details. Thank you.
This is the annual approval of the maximum useful life of the departmental equipment. You see some public works equipment here. You see the radio equipment from the police department, chief, that you're very familiar with. A couple of the new items this year that were approved at town meeting is the sidewalk paver, which we're waiting for delivery for. It's a pretty unique piece of equipment. It can pave a sidewalk as you would see a larger piece of equipment pave a street. The specifications are set to work exclusively on sidewalks. Additionally, in this, and this is coming out of the Stormwater Enterprise Fund, is a new sweeper that we talked about before. This is one of the Elgin Pelicans. It's got a larger cubic yard capacity, and it can dump on-site rather than the Tyco that we have now, and our operator has to drive back to our yard, dump it, we're handling the material twice, et cetera. So this is an update of equipment and just asking for authorization of the maximum useful life of these depreciable assets.
Very good. Any questions? Go
I
ahead.
have one, sorry. Mike, and I apologize, I didn't get a chance to ask you before the meeting. Did someone give us a recommendation on the useful life for these items?
Yeah, so we reached out to the department heads.
I see.
Yeah.
So that these amounts for the useful life, these come from the department heads based on their experience with these items?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And just a follow-up on at least on the DPW side. A lot of your equipment has been going way beyond the useful 15 years. You and I talked about this the other day, and I know that there's been a lot of effort, especially in the last 2 years. That winter that we had of the year before Mr. Dennehy got here, the 106 inches really showed just how tough a position to put you in.
Yeah, let me just say thank you, because the average age of the fleet has significantly decreased over the last year with all that new equipment, so makes our equipment more reliable in the times we need it, especially during those storms. So appreciate that to this board and the previous boards for supporting it.
Sure.
And if I might add, if you look at the first item on the list, they're replacing a 20-plus year pickup truck, and the maximum useful life is 15 years.
Any other discussion? Can I have a motion? You have another question? Go ahead.
No, I was going to move. I move to approve the maximum useful life of the departmental equipment listed below to be financed with the proceeds of the $1,188,601 portion of the borrowing authorized by the vote of the town passed under Article 5 at the May 7th, 2018 annual town meeting as hereby determined pursuant to General Law, Chapter 44, Section 7(1), to be as follows. Purpose pickup truck replaces 20-plus-year-old pickup truck. Borrowing amount $40,000. Maximum useful life 15 years. Radio equipment phase 2 to 30, $130,601, 10 years. Backhoe $120,000, 15 years. Drum style wood chipper $65,000, 15 years. Dump truck $73,000, 15 years. Dump truck $38,000, 15 years. Dump truck $60,000, 15 years. Sidewalk paver $32,000, 15 years. Traffic signal equipment $100,000, 15 years. Sewer meter replacements $250,000, 15 years. Emergency generator $50,000, 15 years. Street sweeper $230,000, 10 years.
Do I have a second?
Second.
So I just have one question on item 2, phase 2, that's 30 is the number of units, correct? Or is that a?
I think that's a
phase two
typo. I think
dash
it's phase 2 of 3.
Okay.
Of 3,
that-
okay, all right.
Thank you.
Because that's why I was just trying to do numbers, I was
Yeah.
trying to figure out.
2 of
Okay.
3. Thank you for the question.
Okay. Any other discussion? Good? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Congrats. Good luck.
Thank you.
Start ordering. Okay. Okay. jump to item 6, which is the FY 2019 approval. Oh, no, this one's been postponed. All right, so I got that one. I didn't even get to read this agenda before I got in here tonight,
Yeah,
so.
we'll be back next
again,
week with that one,
bear-
yeah.
Bear with me, please. Okay, we're going to go to item 7, which is approval of traffic commission recommendations, and this is to approve the following recommendation of the traffic commission from one of their prior meetings, and I will, do you want to just comment on this at all?
Sure, yeah,
Chase?
so we
Okay.
met July 25th. We have 3 recommendations that came out of that meeting. Taft Road and Augusta Road at Pylon was an issue that...
Pillen Road, yeah,
Excuse me.
Pillen.
I hate when people pronounce the street names wrong, too. I understand. There's people, when Squantum Street queues up, that
Right.
sneak up those streets, and residents in the area notified Chief King that they noticed they weren't stopping at all when they took the corners, so this is just going to reinforce the need to stop as they take that left turn. And obviously, they're trying to bypass Squantum and Adams, so hopefully, you know, as we move forward, signalizing that intersection, we can kind of work on reducing that queue to the best of our ability, and this issue may lessen, but in the meantime, you know, stop signs are something we can get up quickly to try to address those concerns of the people in that immediate area.
Okay.
And Milton Street is a little atypical, so the intersection of Milton, Brush Hill, and Neponset Valley Parkway is under the care and control of the DCR. So a suggestion had come up about switching the stop sign on Neponset Valley Parkway to Milton Street, because there was a consultant report that recommended that may improve flow-through some number of years ago. So traditionally, the DCR has looked to the town when it concerns their streets. Even though it may be their control, they like to get the town's buy-in to a change they're going to make on a town-controlled street. So what we did in this case is we pre-approved allowing the DCR to put a stop sign on Milton Street should they choose to do that in the future, so that it just basically just clears the way for that approval, so it can happen quicker when it comes up.
Okay.
And then the final one is a tweak on the time restrictions for Center Lane, Sias, in that area. So we had a competing needs, so the time restrictions that are in place now conflict with the school bus drop-off from the Glover School. So,
In the afternoon?
yeah, so 3 p.m. is too early to get the buses in to drop the kids off, so we're just going to roll that back 4 to 6.
Okay. Okay.
And that was the 3, so.
Can I have a motion? Anyone?
I move to approve the following recommendations of the Traffic Commission. Article 8, Section 12, install a stop sign on Taft Road and Augusta Road at the intersection of Pilon Road. Milton Street, install a stop sign on the westbound side. Milton Street at the intersection of Ponset Valley Parkway, contingent upon DCR approval of removal of a stop sign on the Neponset Valley Parkway on the northbound side at Milton Street, and the addition of a turning lane on Neponset Valley Parkway heading southbound leading up to Milton Street. Article 8, Section 24, change a do not enter Monday through Friday, 3 to 6 p.m. sign on Center Lane 2, do not enter Monday through Friday, 4 to 6 p.m.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Thanks, Chase.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Chase.
Okay. Item 9, which is the discussion approval of a Youth Task Force Committee charge. The motion before us is to approve a Youth Task Force Committee charge as written, and I believe everyone has a copy of that. Is everyone, are we ready to make a motion and then go discussion, or do you want to, go
Well, I have
ahead?
a question. When we talked about this charge the last time, and I think when we talked about the youth task force generally, it might have been at the retreat or one of our earlier meetings, I thought we talked about, because this is such an important issue for us, having 2 selectmen on this committee rather than 1?
You know, and then I started looking at the the workload, and I was like, so I'm fine either way. I'll give you, now that you brought it up, I'll give you my thought. We've divvied out so much work on these committees. And this was something that John Cronin suggested to me the other day, and I find this on the fire station committee. So on that committee, I'm just our liaison. I don't vote. And therefore, time-wise, I don't necessarily have to be at every meeting because I'm not a voting member. And he mentioned this to me about some of these other committees, and I've been to 2 or 3 of their meetings, it's really not us that are doing that. It's our operational people that are really gonna make the changes here and come to us. So I'm fine either way, but I did like the thought of making our people in some of these committees if we can, unlike, obviously statutorily, is it, I lost my head on housing. What did I sit on last year that I used to?
Oh,
Affordable housing.
Affordable housing. There's certain ones, we ought to statutorily have a voting right. I'm just thinking of the workload that everyone's carrying here. That's my thought, but I hear you as well. If you want to have 2, I'll do whatever you want.
Well, I just thought we had talked about that. I remember at
Right.
one point Mike had expressed an interest in it as well. Others may have. This is not one that I had prioritized as one that I'd like to be on, but I thought we had talked about that. That's why I wanted to raise it.
Right.
And It is, I think, going to be a short-term committee because
I do
we're
too.
hoping that
I think there'll be a
we'll address
longer-term
some of these
committee, yes,
issues,
yeah.
and then maybe there won't be a need for this to be a standing committee and make it permanent. So I'm not sure whether the workload that some of the other committees have, at least over the long term, this one may not involve the same workload. That's just my thought.
Well, I don't know. I think it depends because we haven't, I mean, I know that short term, we're looking at what to do for the fall and then to start with programming, but I think there's been a lot of interest in, I mean, space is even mentioned here and what that looks like. So we had talked about having 2, and I know that we had talked about the 2 of you,
Right.
our chair and our vice chair, being on it because you both have different interests in it and strengths that you bring. So I'm not sure what we need to do, but I'm curious if Mike would, I mean, if you have something specific that you wanted to bring to this, I don't know.
You can be the liaison. I don't have to. I mean, to be honest with you, I'm comfortable. After meeting with them, I felt that even given my background as police chief, that they were more than capable of, but I'm fine either way. I'll do whatever you want. If you want both of us, we can be both of us. I don't care.
Can I make a suggestion? Maybe we have one of us, and I'm happy to be a voting member. I'm happy, and one of us a voting and one of us a liaison. I mean, we could do that. Or two of us voting. I like the idea. of- I
I'm
like
trying
the
to save.
Yeah, no, I
I'm
understand.
trying to save people some work hours
Yeah,
here, but okay,
right.
all right.
I actually, I think it's important to have the voice of this board as a voting member. I mean, I'm not wedded to it, but that's kind of my bent on it, that it's a good idea to have the voice of this committee, at least one voice of this committee voting, but I'm not wedded to that.
I'm fine with that. I don't think we need, I thought too, but I mean, just giving the number of committees now and after having, I just, I'll do whatever you want.
It sounds like Mike is interested. I
Okay.
don't know whether Melinda or Tony has any
Either one of
interest in it.
No.
So we'll take them, you all right? You can hear, I mean, you'll be fine. I mean,
I'll-
Michael's there as well. I mean,
Yeah.
it'll be,
And I don't have that many committees yet, so.
yes,
Yet.
yes.
Yet.
Chair, if I might,
Whatever
the
you s-
approval of members of this board is later on the agenda.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, okay.
I think we were just discussing it because it's in, the membership is in the charge,
Right.
that's all.
Yeah.
But,
It does say at least 12, and it includes at least, or one of whom is a member of the board, but it seems to be written broadly enough where it's at least 12 that we
You
could
really
add the
think
second.
12's enough? You think you need 12?
I do. We had our first
Okay,
meeting.
all right. As long as I'm just
yeah,
covered, as long as
we
you
did.
think so.
It was, everybody brings something to the table. It's a very dynamic group. And we didn't meet with everyone. We had one of the students, we had several of the parents, we had the Substance Abuse Prevention Coalition representative. It was very productive. I think a couple of other talented skill sets would be appropriate.
Okay,
Yeah.
because I do think you're going to want to see, I think you're going to see Reverend Allen from next door once his facility is finished, which is scheduled around the first of the year, just from an infrastructure point of view. I think he's really going to be able to bring a lot to the table to help with this, so. I mean, I'll do whatever I can. I mean, you know that I'm going to So I'll go on, I'll be the non-voting member. How's that? That'll give us 2, and I don't have to vote on this. I don't. Is that all right with you? You can be the voting member.
All right, great,
Okay.
great.
Is that all right with you?
Oh,
Okay.
no, that's fine. I just, as Katie said, we had discussed it, and you do.
Yeah, we did, yeah,
You
we
each
did.
bring different strengths and interests, and Mike is saying that indeed, on this group, it will be a real asset, so.
Okay.
So do we need to change the membership to read 2 of whom are board,
we can
a
just-
member of the.
One
the board,
voting and one non, Mr. Zulus to be voting, and
Okay.
myself to be the non-voting
Of
member.
whom is a voting member,
Is that all right?
Yeah, great.
and one of whom
Okay.
is a non-voting.
So, as far as the charge, other than anything else in the charge, are we okay with it as it's currently written? Before I ask for a motion, are we okay with it?
I had no other comments. Did anyone?
You good? Mr. Farrington, good?
Fine, thank you, Chief. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so can I have a motion?
I'll move that we approve a youth task force committee charge as amended, let's say, to include two of whom are members of the Board of Selectmen, one of whom shall be non-voting. Can we add that?
Yes,
She's got that.
I
Okay.
wrote that.
She's got that.
Second.
Any further discussion? All good? Anyone, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous, okay. Did I hear when I walked in tonight, line breakers off the table for now?
Yes, there was one more round of red line edits that town council needs to take a look at. They are actively looking to put bikes on the street as soon as possible, but they had a couple of questions after town council had submitted his series of red lines to them. So the idea is to hash this out this week and get it on the agenda for next Monday night's meeting, and then they can roll bikes out shortly thereafter, probably that Friday.
They being line bike.
Line bike, correct.
Mr. Flynn, I see you're here. Are you okay with this?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So we'll come back to this on the 13th. I'm going to go to item 11. I'm going to ask Town Council John Flynn to join us. And I believe, do you have associate counsel with you tonight? You do. Please come forward. So just a little bit of history here. As people know from our last meeting, we had a citizen petition which was submitted to us relative to the change in the name of the Board of Selectmen. We had voted to send this to the Town Government Study Committee for, just to cover, I asked them 4 things to look at, just so that everyone knows exactly what it was. The questions that I had, and to be honest, I'm very glad that we did do this, because I did have concerns, and just on the process, things that I asked were, would this require a charter change, and I have not heard the answer on that yet. As far as going to town meeting, could this be done on a simple majority, or will it require 2/3? The 4th one is, some communities, their charter requires a referendum, and if we had to have a referendum, that would, if we were to call for a special election, you're talking about a $30,000 expense, plus all the other changes that go along with it. I asked them about how many other towns that have done it, and any questions they had, and I just asked them about their ability to get back to us in a timely manner. Since then, I've also heard from the town clerk, who called me early Friday, who relayed to me her concerns, legal concerns relative to where the Board of Selectmen appear in not just the bylaws of the town, they appear in the election things of the town, several zoning statutes or zoning regulations they appear in, and that all of these would require to be adjusted. And I believe when we brought this to John Flynn later in the day, he agreed with that she was correct in her concerns. So I thank you. The 2 of you have worked on this all weekend, and so with that, I yield the floor to you.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, this is Attorney Cynthia Amara from our office. Cindy has worked quite a bit with me on this subject,
You
and
told
it's
me.
been extremely helpful. I thought you should know that.
Thank you for that.
I thought, with the chair's permission, I'd give an overview.
Absolutely.
And then address some specific issues that I think are pertinent. First of all, as you said, the starting point was a citizen's petition that was submitted. And after talking with you, Mr. Chairman, I agreed to present a draft article that would hopefully address the concerns raised in the citizen's petition, but also address what I need is the procedure that's necessary to implement, to accomplish the purposes of that intent of the citizen's petition. And I'd like to thank Mr. Zulus in particular for supplying on short notice a lot of reference material. It was very helpful to us. It is true that a lot of communities have adopted a provision that makes terms gender neutral, like selectmen, board of selectmen. They're not all the same, however, in the sense that Milton has not only your bylaws, but they have a charter by special act. And that is limited to town meeting, but it does refer in several places to the board of selectmen. So, or not selectmen, rather. So to answer one of the questions that you asked, in my opinion, yes, it is necessary to amend that special act in order to implement the change that's sought. The draft that we submitted to the board attempts in sections A through D to address what I think are the areas that need to be addressed in order to accomplish the change that the petitioners seek. I think the first one, A, is fairly straightforward in that if adopted, it would change wherever they appear the word selectmen, board of selectmen, and selectmen singular as requested by the petitioners. But it also occurred to us as we were looking at it that the word chairman appears a lot of times too, so I thought we would add that just for the sake of consistency. The item 3 I thought was very important because it may be that it turns out that it's not possible to catch this change in every document that the citizens petition article would like to. So item 3 is a catch-all provision that makes it clear that if this passes, the intent of the article is that from here on, the Board of Selectmen, what is formerly the Board of Selectmen, will be known as the Select Board or whatever name town meeting chooses. But that entity would have the powers and duties as the present Board of Selectmen has under law. And we thought that was important because the term selectmen is actually in the Massachusetts general laws. Right. Chapter 41, Section 1 requires each town at the annual town election to elect a number of officers, one of which is identified as the selectman, a selectman. And I thought at least, you can't ignore that. I mean, regardless of when it was enacted, that is what the general laws say. But it's perfectly legal to change that, but I think if the town follows the process that we've set forth here, then that can be accomplished. And I'd like to come back to item A4 at the end. Item B is necessary because, as you mentioned, from talking with the town clerk, the zoning bylaws refer to selectmen and chairman as well. So, and Massachusetts General, therefore it would be necessary to amend the zoning bylaws as well. But the Massachusetts General laws are quite specific on the process to follow to amend zoning bylaws. And in my opinion, you have to be specific and give the public specific notice that you intend to do so. That's the idea of item B. Item C addresses the charter because, as I said earlier, the charter is your special act. First of all, the charter is not a so-called home rule charter. Home rule charters tend to address the entire operation of town government. Your charter is a charter by special act, which is perfectly legal, addresses town meeting particularly, not the entire operation of the government. But we felt it was necessary to make that amendment in that statute because it's an important statute. A question has been asked, which you alluded to, Mr. Chairman. Would this change have to go before the voters in a referendum or at a ballot before the voters? The shorter answer is I'm not sure. I don't believe it has to, but I've asked for guidance from the Chief Counsel for the Elections Division of the Secretary of State's office, and we don't have an answer from them yet. But the argument in favor of it going to the voters would be the charter has been amended several times in the past, most recently to make the moderator's term 3 years rather than 1 year. All of the amendments have, but all of them dealt with the structure of town government. So the argument against it going to the voters would be, it's understandable that the previous amendments would go to the voters because you're changing the structure, the form of government. But here, you're just changing the name. If it's passed by town meeting, you're just changing the name of one of your boards and the identifying names of the members of the board. So I don't know the answer. I don't think it should go before the voters, but we need, as I said, some direction from the Elections Division of the Secretary of the Commonwealth. The last item is more a catch-all, item D. There are other special acts that probably use the term selectman, board of selectmen, selectman chairman. And I just put in there so that wouldn't be a scope issue if it was an afterthought later. I'm not sure, frankly, it would be necessary to go back and seek to amend them all. It might be more effort than is possible, but again, it's in there just to cover that eventuality in case that's a direction the town wants to go to. A couple of other questions have arisen. One is, I just mentioned, does this have to go before the voters? Another question is, and this is why I want to come back to item A4. That language is our best effort to track what is in the petition article. And it refers to all currently active and future town documents and communication. That one probably needs to be looked at. We left it in because I don't think it would be fair to change the text without the board or town meeting voting to do so. But if it's read literally, it could mean something that the petitioners don't attend or that the Board of Selectmen don't attend if you go with this article. So I recommend that as it's being vetted, and look at, for example, collective bargaining agreements are active documents.
I know they are.
But I don't know if the intent is to amend collective bargaining agreements. Town report is an active document. School textbooks, hopefully that's not the intent of it. I would think that one of the potential revisions, if you will, would be to narrow it so it refers to documents created by the town or originated by the town. Also, a question came up, does this provision here, along with the other provisions, accurately cover existing and future town documents? I think it does, particularly with respect to the other parts of A, bylaws, B, zoning bylaws, C, the charter. But in this one, it might be subject to clarification if those who vet it agree with my issue that might need to be tweaked a little, that language currently active and future. But in my opinion, those words do refer to existing rather than the future town documents. And the reason that issue came up is that two of your members, Ms. Conlon and Mr. Farrington, were kind enough to share with us a decision by the Attorney General regarding a Hull attempt to do so. And that was, the Attorney General decided in that decision that they declined to issue a decision because they didn't feel it was a bylaw because it only talked about future documents. Well, this does not talk about future. It talks about current and future. So I think you've covered generically existing. The problem with the Hull effort was that it didn't talk about existing documents, to make a long story short. The Attorney General found that that was defective. Two of your eagle-eyed colleagues picked up on that and asked me, and I think that the answer is that it does cover it, subject to my comment about maybe we could refine, if this, either if the Board of Selectmen approves this, or if, whether or not it's the Board of, two articles in front of town meeting or one, I think that issue might want to be looked at, just to avoid unintended consequences, which I don't think is the intent of the petitioners. But again, if you read that language literally, it might be more encompassing than is intended, or it might not be practical to do so. The last change I'd recommend be considering in the vetting process is to just have some general vet, in case, with all the hard work that's being done and will be done on this, in case something has been missed, that as voted, the motion includes some catch-all language that has the generic language that masculine terms shall be interpreted to include feminine terms. And again, that's just in case something is there we haven't spotted.
Right, because, I mean, as you know, we talked on Friday, and when I went to the Town Government Study Committee, and anyone who's been to town meeting here or understands the history of town meeting, Peter Mullen, who sits on, is he 2 or 3? Peter Mullen, Precinct 2? Who is a longtime town meeting member, a former AG, or he may even still be there. I'm not sure if he's still there or
Yes,
not.
he
But
is.
a longtime servant who has, I can't even count how many times, as you're familiar with too, John, brought up on points of law that he has seen, and that I could tell the other night, and when I talked afterwards with the Town Government Study Committee members, Government Study Committee members, it's been a long weekend, those were some of the questions they had as well, and those were Peter's as well. He had some concerns there, so, and I didn't even think of the contracts, because the board does appear in almost, I think, every current collective bargaining agreement that we have, it is in there. And I didn't even think of that one, but.
Mr. Chairman,
Okay.
if
All
I may,
yours, John.
one other point. I think one of the questions that came from the committee, either Mr. Mullen or someone else, was, should we have more than one warrant article, or can it be done in
Right.
one? I think that it can be done in one article. That's why the draft says A, B, C, and D. And if the moderator agrees, you could have separate motions. I think it would be clear what you're trying to do, and it's not all lumped into one 26-line paragraph. The town could certainly have more than one article, but my personal opinion is that all this can be addressed in one article, because it's all related. The risk with doing two articles would be, two or more articles would be, the worst-case scenario would be not all of them pass. And it could be if it's a long night and there's confusion or something.
Right.
And I think it's clear, if this format, not necessarily the exact text, but this format clearly expresses what the intent is. We want to have gender-neutral language with these positions in particular, and this is how we want to do it. We realize there's more than one document that needs to be addressed, and I think that would be valid to do it with one article.
I'm glad you mentioned, because I think that was Mr. Mullins, one of
Yes.
his, I think that was his first comment to me, was that he didn't
Yes.
think it could be done in one article. He thought it would take two, the way it's written now, that he thought it would take 2 articles. So, I thank you for all you've done on this, and I know Friday was like last minute dumping this all on you, but,
Well, it's important, and we
I
want to
just,
get it right, so.
I had this feeling from the get-go that there was just, this is a major, and I know many people have come and asked, and I also want to thank former member of this board who's on the Town Government Study Committee, Kathy Fagan, who I don't even know how many conversations I've had with her, as well as Resident Emily Armstrong, who I don't know how many conversations you've had with her, and all those being in a legal aspect. Town meeting is a funny thing here. I think we all know that, and so I thank you both for this, for the time you put in on this, and everyone else who was involved in it.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, one last comment, if I
Keep
could.
going.
I mentioned that, I wouldn't say this is unique, but Milton's situation is different because of the way your operating rules are set up, particularly that special act. And some of those decisions that Mr. Zulus and others were kind enough to share with us have a different situation. For example, a lot of them are charter amendments, home rule charter amendments that talk about the whole operation of government. I couldn't find one that was exactly identical to this, but the concept is fine. It's perfectly legal to do it. It's just important to make sure you follow the right process, and that nothing is, because what we don't want is a scope problem, that if something is left out and you go to town meeting, the moderator might say, that's beyond the scope of the article, no one wants that. So I think this is broad enough to cover what I understood to be the intent of the petitioners, and therefore it's for your consideration tonight.
I've used the word process probably 100 times since this first was brought to my attention as one of the main things, but, so my only one question too is, because the only part you didn't answer that I had asked that Mr. Neely's committee at town meeting, would a simple majority work?
Yes.
Or would it be a two-thirds? Simple majority?
No, I'm sorry. Item B would be two-thirds. It's a two-thirds vote because it's a zoning bylaw amendment.
Right, okay.
That's another reason why they're separate, so it'll be clear what the quantum of vote is. But A, C, and D are majority, B is two-thirds.
So if we did this as one article, would
Was-
vote?
With
if you
separate
think-
motions.
So we'd vote separate motions,
Yes,
okay. And
well-
that one motion would be a two-thirds vote.
I can't speak for the moderator, but I
I
think
get-
that would
I
be
get
the
that.
request, to divide the question, if you will, have
Okay.
separate votes on,
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
Because there's as you know, there's a separate, I mentioned earlier that the laws are pretty strict on zoning, the process of zoning. And you need to have, the planning board has to, well, it has to be referred to the planning board. They have to hold a hearing on it. They have to post a legal notice of that hearing, and they have to get a report to town meeting. And unless we do it this way, I think that will be lost in the weeds and not enough notice to town meeting that you're going to be asked to amend your zoning bylaws. And whether some people feel it's momentous or trivial or something in between, the same process applies.
Okay,
Can I ask
well,
a question on that point? I wasn't clear on that, John. Do you mean that this, then, the planning board would have to hold a public hearing on this as it relates to section B?
Well, yes, because it's a
Okay.
proposed zoning bylaw amendment.
And you're saying that if it were separate, if you did these separately, or that will have to be done in either case?
I'm sorry?
What he's saying is, so one article, and each one will be
It
taken as
avoids-
its own motion.
Right, but because it's in this, because it's in one article, the planning board won't have to take it up separately. Is that what you're saying? No.
Just
they
item
still-
B.
They still will have to do item B?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And again, because if it passes, it would be asking the town to amend the zoning bylaws.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, so they have to have a hearing.
Okay. Any other questions for town council on this? No one? We're good?
Well, not really a question, I guess more of, I guess it is a question, John. Most of our discussion at the last meeting was largely procedural, and rather than substantive. And some of it relates to the name itself.
Right.
One question that I have is, you've drafted this the way the citizens petition and Mr. Zulus's petition had read, which was, or warrant article, not petition, had read, was to change the Board of Selectmen to Select Board. There have been some conversations that some people have been having about a potential alternative name. Would it or would it not be within the scope of this article if, say, at town meeting floor, if somebody wants to propose town council, C-O-U-N-C-I-L, to distinguish it from your title, John, town council, would that be within the scope of this article or executive board, some other type of name, if there should be some desire to go with a different name?
If the board's sentiment is to do that, some language should probably be added, because it might be, this is very specific, and the moderator might rule that that's beyond the scope.
Yeah, that's my question.
Yes.
Is- Okay.
As I said earlier, I didn't feel it was appropriate for me to change any of that text, because
Right.
what has been presented to you so far in a petition article and a draft article by one of your members was language specific, and it just didn't seem right to be changing that. I probably should have added some other language, but even that, if the selectmen decide to go with some other wording, yes, we could add some language that would keep that within the scope, but the risk is right now that it wouldn't be in the scope.
Okay, thank you.
So I was not trying to take that away from you. I was just asking on what Mr. Flynn has done for us and what your legal counsel has done, Cynthia, done for us. As to other comment, I'll open the floor right now to any other, any of that discussion to, we've all gotten other alternatives, other names. What town council, my main concern, which, as I say, I talked about, when I went to the town government study committee, was part of the reason we voted to send it there, not that I was looking for a 5-minute answer, but these were issues that obviously, even the ones that I was thinking about were bigger than all of us were thinking about. And I thank you on all that. As far as the other aspects, I know that I've not commented on one way or another on a word specific, because I think as chair, I should be last to say anything here, but I'm open the floor to any of you. I know we've all gotten all kinds of different
Suggestions?
alternative suggestions, yeah, so. Go ahead.
So first, John, on section A4, where we talk about currently active and future town documents and communications, that issue, I don't think it's the intention to go in and amend contracts. I think with the intention, at least my intention, was to talk about public documents that are published by the town, communications that are published by the town, published by the clerk's office, not to go into legal documents that have already been. So it seems to me that we could come up with language there to limit that to the publishing of public documents by the town, or focus on communications and public documents as opposed to some kind of legal or contractual document that, I don't think anyone intends that we go through that process.
Could I just add?
Yeah,
I
please.
suspected that was the case.
Yeah.
Many of my comments are trying to anticipate questions that might come up at town meeting. They're not meant to be critical because,
sure.
to be perfectly frank, every time I looked at this thing, something new would pop up.
Right, sure.
And I just was trying to get a better idea of what the intent is, like as what you just said. And yes, it can be tweaked. Probably take some thought because, contracts are signed, but then they're public documents. But I
Right.
get the intent, and just a question of language, really, yes.
Right.
Thank you.
Right. And then on the zoning piece of this, so the zoning bylaws are incorporated, are they incorporated within the bylaws of the town? Or is it a separate document? I mean, it's, and I don't want to go down a rat hole here, John. I'm curious about the idea that we need to go to the planning board to have a public hearing on the zoning part of this, for this portion.
You have a very unusual situation where your zoning bylaw is Chapter 10 of the general bylaws, known as the zoning bylaws.
Right.
So every time in your warrant you see a zoning bylaw, it says, to see if the town will vote to amend Chapter 10 of the general bylaws known as the zoning bylaws. But they don't physically appear there. There's I think, a heading, but it's a separate document. Yes, they are a separate standalone. I can't give you the history of that reference, but
Right.
why it's referenced in the general bylaws, but they are a zoning bylaw that by statute requires the procedure you just alluded to. It does require a 2/3 vote to amend. So given that interesting phraseology, yes, it is a zoning bylaw, and when you amend it, you have to follow that statutory procedure.
Which is the public hearing
Yes.
by the planning board.
Yes, the selectmen, if the selectmen get, unless the planning board initiates it, say petition article to amend the zoning bylaws comes to the selectmen and the town clerk, whoever gets it ships it to the planning board, that starts the clock. They have to post a legal ad notifying the public that there's a hearing, and that is strictly construed. If towns blow it, then you're out of the box right away. But yes, then they hold a public hearing, then they make their report to town meeting by statute. So all of that, as I said, whether people think this is insignificant or extremely important or something in between, the same process applies.
Is there a community that you, I know this is a short, there isn't really been a lot of time to look at this. Has there been a community or a case in a community where like a bump has come up because they failed to dot an I across a T in the way they passed this?
Where what has come up?
Where
Or bump?
Where in their language,
yeah.
in making the change, that they, you know, like Mr. Zul's talking about falling in a hole, that they forgot to catch something or amend something correctly or legally that got them into trouble.
The only one I'm aware of is Hull, that forgot to put current or existing and put future. And what the Attorney General said is, we declined to review it because it's not a bylaw. So what they're telling the town is, you have not adopted a bylaw. Go
Right.
back to the drawing board. Are there any-
The only
ahead.
other thing I would add is there has been some language in some of the AG opinions that if there hasn't been compliance with the planning board hearing on their recommendation, that you'd have to go back for a separate zoning thing down the road. They've been a little bit fuzzy about whether it had to be completely separate, but there had to be that procedural thing John's been talking about the planning board holding a hearing and making its report, or else it wouldn't be accepted, even if it had the 2/3.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead.
And I just have one final question. On the charter change, John, if you determine, contrary to your best guess, that a referendum is required, what would be the result if the town, could the town, I guess is the proper question, could the town at town meeting vote to amend its bylaws and just either not amend the charter to change those? I think it may be just twice, or maybe twice a selectman appears in the bylaw, in the charter, or maybe once more. Could the town vote to amend the bylaws and just leave the charter as is, or would that inconsistency create a problem?
In my opinion, it would create a problem. It's an important document. Just the word charter elevates it to a, I mean, it's a special act, but it's more than that, and I wouldn't recommend that they follow that procedure. The word chairman also appears, unfortunately, in it, or fortunately, depending on you. So I would
No,
recommend
it's
it.
unfortunately, as the chairman,
Yeah, yes.
No,
But seriously, I think it would be a problem. This is all.
I agree with you there, and I just think of just in litigation alone, the types that have come across this desk and that you, as our legal counsel, deal with. I mean, they just come in so many shapes, many that people would never even think of
Yes.
could exist. I think that if you're going to make a change, the attorneys don't know, well, from my days in the police academy, the word terra firma is where you always want to be when you're
Right.
standing somewhere in a fight, even a legal one. I think that we want to do it right if we're going to do it. That's been my thought all along,
Yes.
as you know.
As I said, 3 of your members have provided helpful backup. Mr. Zoll has provided an exhaustive list of the communities. I'd actually talked with the person in the Attorney General's office who was reviewing these things, who was very forthright. Yes, they have approved a bunch of them, but cautioned that this hasn't been challenged in court yet. And
The
they
town
obviously
clerk said
can't.
that as well, yes, yeah.
And that's why we drafted this as encompassing as we could. So with all the good intentions, and if all this hard work goes through, past this town meeting, the legislature passes the charter amendment, then we get sued, I think we're in much better shape if we follow not necessarily the identical language, but the format that is before you tonight. It seems to me you would be covering all the bases, so it'd be clear there's a real good faith and thorough effort here to accomplish what the intent is, to make this language gender neutral.
Okay,
I have one question.
absolutely.
If it passes, and we need to update all of these documents, is there a time frame within which that needs to be done, or we're open to some legal ramification?
There's no time frame that I'm aware of, except the bylaw provisions that they have to be submitted to the Attorney General.
Right.
They have to be approved by the Attorney General, and the town clerk has to post them.
Right.
I would, well, if it passes, I think the immediate, well, I don't mean to speak for the proponents, but it seems to me the immediate priority is to, if this passes, zoning bylaws, general bylaws, charter.
Right.
Then address the documents, however the final wording is, the documents and communications that have that language in them. Not that that's not important, but I think it's really a priority to get your official documents, your
Right.
guiding documents, if you will, in proper form, and then do the best you can to correct the existing documents. And to be frank, I have no idea what kind of volume that is, because as I said to you, every time I look at this, I think there's something new. So yeah, I think, though, that clarifying that language in item 1B will help a lot but that's the priority I would recommend, Ms.
Okay.
Collins, yes.
Thank you. I know that the town's working on having the bylaws, the zoning bylaws especially, but reconfigured and
Codified.
codified,
codified.
right. So I didn't know if this was actually a good time to do something like this.
Yes.
Because it would
Yes.
save on time, money, and effort. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely, it would be. Yes.
Thank you, Mike.
And Peter Mullen is on that committee.
Yes.
Oh, okay, great.
Actually, he's the chair of that committee, isn't he?
Correct.
So can I come back to a procedural point?
Yes, absolutely.
So where we're at procedurally is, we had a citizen's petition submitted at our last meeting a couple weeks ago, and our warrant deadline is Monday, the 13th. So we're now looking at a new article that really builds on what our colleague Mike Zulus put forward, and I forgot to do this at the last meeting, so I want to thank Mike for all of his work that he's put into this, and also the Citizens Group for the time, and John and your office, and everyone, the Town Government Study Committee, everyone who's weighed in to some extent over the last few weeks on this issue. It seems to me that the question for our board is whether to submit this as a board article, which was what Mr. Zulus had been asking that we do 2 weeks ago. And at the beginning of that meeting, we had the citizens article come in, which was worded the same. And really what this draft that John and Cindy have put together is building upon that and adding some additional, adding the charter, adding the zoning bylaws. But it's essentially the same concept, and it's really the same issue. It's building upon it, I think is the way I would phrase it. So I think that's the question for our board tonight, is whether, as Mr. Zulus suggested 2 weeks ago, whether the board submits an article. I think that would still leave us with a warrant that would have a citizens article, and if we
Yes.
were to submit this article, and if that were the case, if that's the desire of the board, then we probably should put this article first, let the citizens article go second. The citizens article stays in because you need every single citizen who submitted it to withdraw it.
Right.
And that's just not feasible, and I don't think we should ask the citizens to do that. But, their article has prompted this discussion and gotten this going, and has generated, and along with Mr. Zulus's work and his efforts, have generated, at the point where we're at now, where we have a more comprehensive article, but essentially the same concept as what was presented to us 2 weeks ago as a potential board article, and that we actually voted to submit, and I was the one who moved to reconsider it because the wording was exactly the same. So it seems to me that that's really, John, the situation
Yes.
we're in procedurally.
Yes, that citizen citizens petition article was properly filed. The town clerk has certified that it has sufficient signatures, so that is legally entitled to be in the warrant. Yes, it'll be. Yeah, that's right.
And could I just follow up on the
You
issue I
can.
brought up earlier about the name?
That's,
Go
go ahead.
I know I'm sure we've all had a lot of conversations with people in the last couple of weeks. I know I have. I was concerned about the name, and I know Tony had brought up the name too. Select Board is something that was a little more cumbersome than our current language. That's been an issue in a lot of other communities that have been going in this direction. That's not something that's unique to us. That's been an issue with some other communities as well. But it seems that I hate to use the word trend because that created so much discussion after the last meeting, but the trend among the towns that are making the change seems to be to use Select Board rather than, say, a town council, COUNCIL, or an executive board. Although the town of Wakefield, I did a little research after the last meeting, the town of Wakefield went from a board of selectmen to a town council, and stated right in their charter that the town council
Yes.
is the board, what's known in state law as the board of selectmen. So there are, there's at least that other option. There may be other communities looking at town council. But a few people have made the point to me, and I think we may have even touched on this at our last meeting, and it seems to make sense to me that if the vast majority of them are going with Select Board, there's probably some benefit in having consistency among communities that are that are governed by similar boards, and there is a tie-in to the historical name. So those two arguments were made by a lot of people I spoke with as the reason to go with select board, and that seems persuasive to me. So, while I kind of like the idea of town council as a name, I understand the consistency argument as well.
You good?
Yeah, thank you.
I have nothing to add.
Nothing.
Nothing.
So, my first thought is, from the get-go, is both Melinda and Katie, has been to the two of you as the female members of this board, and I've said that publicly and repeatedly. My second is, as a member of the board, was, if we're gonna do this, we need to do this right, and I still think that we did the right thing bringing this to the Town Government Study Committee, because that brought it to you, John, and brought it to us here, and I thank you again, Emily. I know you and, I don't even, as I say, I don't even know how many conversations I had with Kathy in the past few weeks. It does lead me to one procedural thing. There was one question that was asked. In special town, when something like this, if it has to go to referendum, is passed, if there's a 60-day window, or something, there could be a window in how many days. In other words, if a vote is taken as a referendum vote, the town meeting must approve it within so many days of that vote. This was brought up to me. The number was 60 days. It was actually
I'm not
Kathy
sure
who brought it to me, to my attention, said,
I'm
so
not
let's say hypothetically, it has to go to a referendum. So let's say October town meeting passes this. Votes, by then, I would you agree with me that we would know one way or another definitely whether or not we have to have a referendum, go to a
Yes.
referendum vote? Okay.
Yes.
So what I'm giving to you is hypothetically we do. Okay, so if we schedule a vote, if a vote is taken passes by the general referendum of a community, there's a time frame on when it has to be enacted. I thought she said 60 days. I thought she did. Because my only concern is, if we have to have a general, so let's say this passes October town meeting, can we wait until April to vote on it, if we have to vote? Because I really would not want to have to call, and this is one of the things that the town clerk brought to my attention, if we had to have a special election, that's a minimum $30,000 cost. And I think that could hurt the effort, just the fact that we're spending $30,000 to vote on one question. So my thought was, if we do have to vote on this from a referendum point of view, to put this in the April election. You get where I'm going with it now?
Yeah, I'd have.
You may not, and I don't think you have to answer this to me now, but this was the last, and I
Right.
think it was Kathy who brought this up to me, and it may even have been mentioned to me by one of the other members of the town government. I've had so many conversations, I can't remember them all. But that was the last note that I wrote to myself, was about a referendum vote, if it had to be done, not having a special election and being able to do it at the April meeting.
I will
You remember that,
verify
Katie?
this.
I'm not aware of that, no.
I'll check this. I think, but I'm not sure, that the time frame you're referring to is the time that the town clerk needs to get an election ready.
Okay.
Most of them go with 65 days to give them a little cushion. I believe it's 60 days, I'm not positive of that, because there's a lot of work for them to do to get an election ready. I believe that there would be nothing to prohibit the selectmen from putting that on the ballot for the annual town election.
Okay.
I think it's more the back end,
Okay.
the front end, rather, that you can't rush it. You have to, by statute, you have to give the clerk's office time to do the necessary preparation, because, you have absentee ballots and all that.
Right.
Unfortunately, it's not all in one section of the general laws, but the election laws, when read in conjunction with each other, require a reasonable time in order to get all their ducks in a row, one of which is the absentee ballots and all that. Printing ballots, absentee ballots. There's a lot of work that goes into putting an election, and
I know
cost,
there
as
is,
you
and
mentioned, yeah.
the clerk made me very aware that, and rightfully so, she's, it's her own due diligence, and
Yes.
she's doing her due diligence, and I wrote it down and made note of it, because I
Yes.
figured the one person to bring that to was you.
Well,
Okay.
let's hope the answer is that it doesn't have to
Okay.
go on the
And
ballot, but if it does, then,
If it does, then we'll deal with it, but
Yes.
we need to be, I
yes.
think we need to be cognizant of that. That's my last question.
I have one other. John, could
Go
you
ahead.
send us that Hull information? You mentioned me, but it probably was Tony. I wasn't the one who sent it.
I have it here.
If you have it,
but
Tony,
I'm
could you
happy to pass
circulate it, just so we
around,
can
yeah.
read it?
Yeah, take
Okay,
it.
thank you.
You might have sent me a link to it, but it was one of the things, yes, I will send it to
Okay.
you, yes.
And there's one typo, and I'm only bringing this up because if we don't
There is
catch
a
it now,
typo.
Peter Mullen will catch it on the floor of town meeting.
Yeah.
John, in section C, in the fifth line,
Both have the same
the word work should be
Yep.
word.
Okay.
Just
Same
a
one.
typo.
That's true.
Very good.
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
Oh.
In section C, the fifth line, we just need to change the word work to word.
Deleting the work, yeah.
Yeah, by doing
Yes.
the work chairman. Oh, the work and chairman go together, don't they, Katie? They do.
Very much so, yes.
So I just.
Thank you.
I just want to add this one comment, and I've said this a lot, that, my concern is more about especially the feeling of the female members of this board and the past female members, because I'm not a woman. No matter how much I may care about women, I am not a woman. And I've also heard so much about tradition, and as you know, John, having grown up here, I had a long conversation on Friday with our former town administrator, Mr. Cronin, but I relate this to a story. 2 years ago, I had the unique privilege to be in Israel on a terrorism mission representing this country. And while it was a very enlightening thing, the most special thing that I was allowed to experience took place in the Golan Heights, very close to the Syrian border, on a Saturday night. And it was something that our Jewish counterparts did for us. And what they did was they arranged for us to go, because there were 12 of us, I think 11 of us were Catholic. They were all police executives from the Commonwealth. And they arranged for us to go to 4 o'clock Mass on the Sea of Galilee. But the most unique thing about it was in Hebrew. It was a Catholic Mass recited in Hebrew. But at the end of it, after I went to communion and we all left, I had still gone to Mass.
Yeah.
So this may be difficult and may be historic, and in the end of this, we're still going to be the executive board of the town of Milton, that people will come to us with their issues and their problems and expect us to do our best to solve them. So we're still going to be here on cable TV every other Monday for as long as I can remember. So if the board, if the members wish to vote on this as our amendment tonight, I'll accept this I'll accept a motion on this to move it as our article going forward. If you're all right with that, John, if the other members are okay with that.
Yeah, the procedure would be fine, with the edit that.
Yeah, do you
Ms.
want some language in the motion just in case of any other edits?
Well, right, I mean, are we working, will you be working to narrow the scope in, what is it, 4? That we talked about, to limit it to public documents and not contracts, and I just want to make sure it's right before we,
So
or if we can just speak to that in the motion, or, I don't know.
going to your point, my first thought was to give you until the 13th to do this, and then vote this next Monday. But you're not going to be here, and I don't want to do this without you here.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know. Go
I can
ahead.
make a suggestion. If we want to take a vote, could we have a motion to submit the article subject to an amendment for that language to satisfy the concern that Melinda won't be here? So we could vote to submit the article
That'd be-
subject to an amendment to the last sentence of section A4, if any.
Okay with that?
Oh, that's fine, I just wanted to make sure we accounted for that.
Yes.
That change, because I think it's important for 2 reasons. One of which is that the scope isn't unnecessarily broad and doesn't leave us open to
Yes.
work we don't need to do, and also that we don't impede it's otherwise whatever success it would have not to add any added impediment that shouldn't really be there because it's unnecessary.
Mr. Chairman, if I'm following this, if that vote passes, would we be asked to submit a revised edition for next Monday that in Ms. Collins' absence, the board
Yes.
could act it on because the sentiment is tonight?
Yes.
Could I also ask, would you like insertion of the catch-all language I mentioned earlier? Quite a few charters and everything have language. A term in the the concept is that a term that has masculine gender shall be interpreted to include, just in case there's something somewhere we haven't picked up on.
Is everyone okay with that?
Please.
Yes, yes,
Please.
thank you.
All right. And again, that would be worked into the bylaw language and in general, too.
I have one last question. Do we need to communicate with the chair of the planning board to have them schedule a public hearing before, I don't think we can get it before the 13th, we just need to have it before we go to town meeting, am I correct?
Yes,
Okay,
correct.
you got that, Michael?
But
You were
doesn't the
correct when
warrant-
you said you just need to have them do it before town meeting.
Before
not
town meeting,
before
right, yeah.
Articles finalized, yes.
Okay.
Yes,
But John, don't they need to do it before the warrant committee can vote on it?
yes.
So they should do it soon, even though
Soon.
it's.
Okay,
Yes,
so,
yes.
well, that's fine. So we want to get it, so we can get the warrant committee's recommendation. Okay,
Because the warrant committee is a short window for the October meeting.
I know it does.
Yeah.
And I think they're having their first meeting, is it this week or next week?
I don't know.
And I think it's I think the first meeting, because there's so many new members, is more of a orientation type meeting versus a substantive meeting. Okay. So,
You gonna make the motion?
I'm going to ask you to make the motion as the senior member of this board.
Well, I'd like to ask Mr. Zulus to make the motion because it's Mr. Zulus's, Mr. Zulus's idea, and it's basically his article just expanded to include some additional provisions.
Well, that's fine. Just to move us along, I'll move to submit the article, subject to amendments to Section A4, if any, and subject to an addition with respect to the use of pronouns and masculine and feminine pronouns.
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous. We're going to send you a bill in the mail. I'm only kidding. Where are we? Okay. Thank you both.
Thank
Emily,
you.
thank you as well. And Kathy Fagan, who I'm sure is home watching, I want to thank her as well for all the time she put in on this. I just,
Mr. Chairman, would you like me to hang around for
Yes, I
discussion
do.
of other
Yes,
articles?
we do.
Yes,
But
okay.
co-counsel, if it's okay with you, can go home.
Did you want me to
Thank
stay?
you.
Or you want me to leave?
Unless you want to.
Thank you very much for tonight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for coming. Thank you for the short notice on it, too. I know it was, what day is today? Mike?
It's the 6th.
How come it's not on my, I don't see today's on my. Today's, oh, I got it, I found it. Sorry for everyone at home, just bear with me. Okay. We're going to item 12, which is the approval of the Substance Abuse Prevention Coalition donation acceptance. And this is a
Don't we
donation.
have other articles?
Yes.
Oh, yeah,
have
we do,
other
yeah,
articles.
11B. We do that. We have 11B, we have the planning board articles, and then any other potential board of selectmen articles. Why don't I go, okay. Okay. Do you need to comment at all, John, on the planning board articles that are going before us? No, okay, all right.
I
Go
don't know
ahead,
if there's
Kate,
anyone
John.
here who can answer this question, but I thought that the planning board was working on other articles that are not included here, and I didn't even know they were working on these, but I know that they had a discussion at one of their meetings about the alternate member and about the term, and they're not included here.
For the
Okay.
13th, yeah.
Do you want to do
Thank you.
these, what we have tonight, or you want to wait and do all of them on the 13th? I'll do however you want, if we can.
Let's plot through each.
All right, that's okay, I agree.
Yeah, I
All
mean, I
right,
don't
so
think
let's
we
go.
have to vote, it's the planning board submitting them, so
So we don't
we just
need to
have to
vote.
accept them, but
Okay.
at some point,
Right.
closer to town meeting, we might want to weigh in on whether we support them or not, but they're pretty complicated.
But the changes,
And
really, I
lengthy.
went through, and I don't think that the changes are really large, so.
Is there a black line? I only got a clean.
No,
copy.
and that's something I called Bill today to ask about that, because I said, you know, it would be good to have the text highlighted that's being changed, because I was going through line by line. So yeah, I mean, we'll want to go through it, but in one case, for I think it's the building height, what happened was, their language was approved, in the wait, which one?
By them, by the planning board?
No, by town meeting,
Yeah.
in 2014, but what happened was the entire text was not included, and so most of the text actually was then not valid anymore, so we're voting to put that back. So I can tell you about that one. But the other ones, I've gone through and looked at the changes, but we might want to have the planning board speak to them for us if we want to talk about, I don't know how you feel about that.
I mean, I can only speak to the way we've done it the last few years. Usually, if an independent board submits articles, they just automatically are submitted, and then at some point, you know, we
Then we
spend a
weigh
little
in.
time reading them, but as we get closer to town meeting, in the past, we used to then vote to support them or not.
Got
And
it.
we may not even
Great.
be asked to weigh in on some planning board articles, but I mean, they're pretty lengthy, and
Yeah.
not having seen a black line, I didn't go and compare,
Right,
I didn't go line by line against the existing zoning bylaw, and
that's good.
in
It
fact,
took a
partly
long
because the
time.
existing zoning bylaws are updated through 2007 on the
Right.
website, so we don't even, we
Right.
may not even have the most recent
Right.
version.
Right.
But it would
They-
be nice if they could give us a black line if they want us to support any of these.
Right, right. There is a version that they're using online, but it's not necessarily official, so.
Go ahead.
So the vote tonight would be just to accept them for the warrant, but not to take a position one way or the other, and then we can do that later on. Is that,
Right, because I don't think a town meeting, are we actually asked to endorse on plan?
Sometimes, on the large zoning, you know, the Carberry estate,
Okay,
those ones
okay,
we
all
were,
right,
but for some technical changes, we may not be.
Okay.
And it looks like these are pretty technical.
Do you want to do that? Want to make a motion? We just do exactly that for now on those planning board articles?
Do we need a new
Usually on
motion?
the-
I think we usually just,
On the day they're due, there's usually like an en masse acceptance of all the articles.
Okay,
So like I'll list them all out and
okay.
it'll be on Monday.
You okay with that? Good?
That's fine.
Good?
Sure, that sounds good.
Okay. Anything else on the planning board articles? All right, how about any other potential articles that, other than the ones we've already discussed and the one we voted on tonight?
well, since we have town council here, could we just ask, John, you did receive a copy of our plastic bag article?
Yes.
Okay, and so you're
Yes.
reviewing that?
Yes.
We have comments that everyone should have seen from Sustainable Milton, but
Mhm.
we haven't yet gotten comments from the Farmers Market or the Chamber of Commerce, so hopefully we'll get that this week and have it for the 13th.
Town council also, if I might, Mr. Chairman, town council also did weigh in on the retired police officers, and
Yes.
and an amended version
I
had
saw
gone
that.
around. If town council could just speak to that briefly, it was more, some words
Yes.
pointed under this act. I saw you use several times.
Yes.
If you could just briefly explain some of the changes that you redlined.
Has the board all received that article, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
The intent of it is to allow the chief, with the approval of the town administrator, to appoint retired police officers, special police officers, but not only to do traffic details, but to perform police work if necessary. And the example the chief gave was police officer could be working a detail, say, down in Lower Mills, and there's a robbery in progress at the bank, or one of the two banks, or pick your spot, a home invasion, if this passes, that officer would be entitled to perform police duties. He was very specific about retired Milton police officers. My understanding, we represent a couple of communities that have done this before. My understanding is that they like to keep a tight rein on it. And I think the way this is drafted, that would be the case, because it sounds as if the intent of the chief is to be directly involved with this as to who is appointed, whether they're suitable, how they're performing. There is one provision, well, most of my edits are form, just to put it in proper form, because, as you know, when we do special acts, if we have the information available, we like to put it in the form, frankly, to help the legislature to see what we're doing. But the key language you'll see in there is, provided that the general court may reasonably vary the form and substance of the requested legislation within the scope of the general public objectives of the petition. That allows, which happens fairly often, actually. The general court will contact the town, or say the Senate Council or your legislative delegation will have a suggestion that's appropriate. And this language is broad enough. It was suggested a long, long time ago by the then Senate and House Counsel, and I've always kept doing it. I think it's a very big help. So the first few changes are technical, but several places, as Mr. Dennehy said, I thought it was important to keep emphasizing that it refers to special police officers appointed under this act. Now, it might be redundant. Any misunderstanding that this applies to any police officer, special police officer from another town or whatever. So they vet the training of them, and you know, I think it's detailed enough so that your chief and town administrator will know that candidate X is fit to perform the duties of it.
Right, they vet the training on the 4196,
yes,
right?
Yes,
right.
But a couple of provisions. Number one, there's a maximum age of 70, which I like.
That's
because,
general in almost
yeah,
all of them, yeah.
And it makes a lot of sense, because no matter how fit they are, those of you who haven't reached that
Careful,
yet,
John.
you may think that, you know, but seriously, reaction time,
Right.
sometimes vision,
Right.
and you know what I mean, Mr. Chairman. And I think it's a
I
good
do.
provision.
This is
and,
not a job you want to be doing at 70.
right,
You get that.
right. But
You don't
I
want to be
did-
doing it at 60, never mind.
Right, right. But on the other hand, it's a determination, I think, of most, if not all, the chiefs in the Commonwealth,
Right.
that officers in their 60s are still, well, depending upon if they pass, obviously, obvious qualifications, are quite capable of performing those functions. So, but again, they'll be vetted by your chief and your town administrator. But there is one thing I wanted to point out here in Section 7. There's a split of opinion on this as to whether the benefits of Chapter 41, 111F, leave without loss of pay, should apply to these folks. And frankly, there's not unanimity on that. Your chief, along with some other chiefs, feels the answer to that is no, that they're independent contractors, and they're not employees. But that could be, I'm just giving you a heads up, that issue could be an issue at town meeting, and some people might say, well, should they be? Well, your chief is, in this draft, is recommending they not be, along with some of his colleagues in other communities who have done so. I guess then what that would mean is that if a retired police officer is appointed a special police officer and is injured performing those duties, he or she better be sure they have a good medical plan, because it's really part-time employment. And what you don't want is to get into the slippery slope that this, because of lack of specificity, entitles someone to all the benefits of employment. That is not what this is all about. But I just want to give you a heads up on that. I think the rest are all form. And frankly, I think this is partly legal and partly policy, but the intent, in my experience, is that police chiefs are more comfortable having special police officers who worked in the town, who they either worked with or know they worked with predecessors of them, that they know the town better, and they can just serve the town better. They know the department better, they know the streets and, you know, the layout of the town, and they're just able to respond quicker, to understand the nature of the job, and it all makes sense to me, and legally, and those are the edits. As I said, most of them are form edits, but the two I did want to point out was, number one, to reinforce, even if it sounds repetitive, that it's special police officers appointed under this act, and two, that your chief has made the judgment that he does not want these people to be eligible for benefits or to be getting leave without loss of pay and those kinds of things. And it could be an issue at town meeting, so I just thought you should be aware of that.
I only had one issue, and I mentioned this too. I've already mentioned this to the chief. I think the 4 years might be too restrictive. I'm just thinking that maybe we should bump it back, most to 5. And I think he just came up with when we started looking at those who may fall under this category, that even he wasn't, I said, start looking up this one, and he's like, wow. So maybe you can have a follow-up conversation with him on that. That was my only concern in it. And just in a follow-up to you on the one alone, I think the one exception is if they are killed. I think there's a precedent case out of Marshfield where one was killed, and he did receive the statutory death benefit.
Yeah.
Other than that, I'm good. Anybody else on that one? Any others? Anything else on?
I actually
Go
have two
ahead.
follow-up questions, Katie, getting back to the article that you presented on the plastic bags. You said you were waiting to hear back from the farmer's market and Sustainable Milton? Is that right?
Sustainable Milton sent us some comments
Okay.
that I think have been forwarded to everybody and to Hillary Waite, and hopefully she can help us with some of the technical questions. The farmer's market and the chamber have it to look at, and they were
Okay.
both meeting with their members last week, but we haven't heard anything.
Okay, yeah, I was at that meeting, the chamber.
The chamber meeting?
Yeah, we didn't get
How did
into
it go?
too
Did-
deeply, frankly.
Were there any comments that anyone made, or did they say they were going to continue to review it?
I guess continue to review. It was a very sparsely attended meeting.
Okay.
But I didn't know if you had, like, expressly sought feedback from the farmer's market and the chamber, or you were just perhaps waiting for them to give us something?
We did. It was emailed out to them,
Okay.
and Gene Boylan, the chair of the farmer's market, said he was going to review it last Thursday with some of his members, and he had been previously consulting with the trade association that represents the farmers markets.
Okay.
So I'll follow up with him this week and see if there's anything further.
I think one thing you better tell him, just as I did with Mr. Magnosa, we need to let him know it's not coming this, that he's okay for this
Well, but
season, yeah.
for when it
this
takes
year,
effect,
if it's
yes.
done when we
Okay.
expect it.
Will do.
That question was raised at the chamber meeting, and I mentioned that Mike was fully supportive of it.
Yeah, he was great. In
Yeah.
his meeting item, he was excellent. Because just in point, since you brought this up, I made a point of looking, and one of the biggest fruit ones there, it's all the bags that will be covered on this restriction. So there's one big one that definitely, so I think having that conversation with Mr. Boylan's probably very prudent.
And whatever we get, we'll forward to John, because John may
Okay.
have some changes to make
Yes.
to it.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, just a
Yes,
heads
sir.
up, for whatever reason, in some other communities, this can get really feisty, this
Sure it
debate.
could. I know.
That's not an opinion of just the fact that it can get pretty intense, surprisingly.
Which one, John? The
The plastic bag ban, yes.
Yeah, I talked to some people in Randolph, and they mentioned something about a carbon footprint as it relates to paper is exceedingly greater than that of plastic, and so on and so forth. I don't know if there's any truth to that, any merit, but it was one counter argument, but I'm on board with it. I think it's great, but I don't know of any drawbacks, frankly, but I'm sure there are some out there, and perhaps those will be raised.
It sounds as though Sustainable Milton is looking for us to be even more aggressive, but my personal feeling as one member of the board, and others may agree or disagree, is we have to maybe walk before we run and at least
Yeah.
get started with
Yeah.
what some
Agree.
other communities are doing, and we can always look at other things later.
I'll give you an example. So going back, so the Pan Mass Challenge in the 2 days utilizes 70,000 bottles of water. And this year, in a sustainable effort, decided to move to giving every rider, they let them have their own, and every volunteer I'd never seen anything like it. It was like a flat, and bringing in water trucks, and at every station for the whole 100 nights, people just refilling, and I was like, when I first saw it on the plan, I'm like, well, how many bottles of water do we need? And like, 70,000. I was like, well, think about it, 2 days, 600, if each one drinks, you're there. We don't realize how much plastic we really do put into the environment, so. Thank you, Katie, again, for the work you've done. And John's right, it's probably gonna be, we'll have to walk before we run. Okay. Are there any others on that? Go ahead.
Well, I mean, I know just because something, well, the Sustainable Milton mentioned the legislation that was being worked on, but I mean, that hasn't gone anywhere, so.
On a statewide level.
On a statewide level, so there's that. But I think that the thing for me, we also touched upon last time, which was what can we put in place to help low-income residents, perhaps, and also to see what what real need is there, because we may perceive a need that's not there, or we may perceive a smaller need than is there. So I didn't have time to look at what other communities are doing and research and things, but I do want to make sure that we somehow keep track of that and help with that in some way. And maybe Hillary Waite is
I thought
the
she,
person.
didn't Hillary mention this? Yeah, didn't Hillary mention that in her discussions that, especially in like the senior, that the disposable bag has become like the pen of, giving out the pen,
Right.
that it's because of exactly what you're referring to, their
Yeah.
need is giving them these bags to make it easier for them so they don't have to rent, buy, purchase, and that they can
Right.
keep doing. But she was on top of that, she did bring up that subject, but she had a
Yeah.
couple options, but I remember that was one of them.
Okay. Well, I know the Solid Waste Advisory Committee, we're still meeting on Friday, right? So I think that came up there too as well. And I think there might even be some creative things that we can do. I just would like to make sure that we do them and are responsive. So,
Maybe it's something we can team up with the chamber on for an informational session, and then just have a conversation about how we might address the needs of people who may need reusable bags. I mean, hopefully some of the stores will be using paper bags, will supply their own paper bags, but
but it would
That
be
may not
great
be
if
all
we
of them.
weren't using those either, because that creates its own kind of problem. Okay. So I guess we'll be talking about that on Friday.
we had an open issue at our last meeting too about the fines and how we
Right.
would apply the fines. So
Right,
I think if
right.
anyone on the board has comments, send them to the town administrator. They can be sent over to John, and we can work that out.
I'm thinking about other, just look at, one of our probably most prominent fines that could be written come under the authority of our animal control officer, and even those are difficult. The $100 one for marijuana public still applies, that's still in a pick on, I think you may have seen a Globe story on this 2 weeks ago about how most police departments aren't even doing it because it's just so randomly being smoked in public now, or utilized in public. So I'm okay however anyone wants to go on the fine part of it. But I don't think it's gonna be one that you'll see utilized too much. Okay. Anything else? Any other articles? We're good? All right, moving right along, we're gonna go to.
Thank you, John.
Thank you all.
Thank you, John.
Thanks,
Yes,
Thank you.
Is John staying on for later? Does he have-
No, he's fine. Yep.
You're gone, all right. Thank you for the Friday and everything this weekend.
Thank you all for all your
Your colleague as well.
information.
Thanks for
you all
making me
provide.
laugh on Friday.
Yes. We tried, don't we?
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Item 12, approval of substance abuse prevention coalition donation that was made from the First Congregational Church. Do I have a motion on this?
I'll move that we accept a donation to the Milton Substance Abuse Prevention Coalition in the amount of $1,000 from the First Congregational Church.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Item 13, boards and committees appointments. This is to the Fair Housing Committee. And I thank you, Mrs. Collins, for enlightening me on the motion here.
I make a motion to appoint Bertha Hoskins of 726 Blue Hill Avenue, Thomas Callahan of 16 Orono Street, Joseph A. Duffy Jr. of 6 Westbourne Street, Richard Beeler of 77 Church Street, Richard G. Wells Jr. of 31 Granite Place, and William Clark of 525 Canton Avenue to the Fair Housing Committee to serve through July 2019.
Seconded.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Boards and committees, these are reappointments, am I correct, to the LEPC, which is our local emergency planning committee, which probably one of our biggest committees, but they do some great work, and it has nearly every entity of government in all of our private partners as members, so. Can I have a motion on these reappointments?
I will make a motion, but before I do.
Okay,
Do you need me to read all of these names and addresses into the record, or could I just say, et cetera, et cetera?
I'll accept it anyway. However you like. What is it, Leah? Do we need to read all the names?
I believe you do.
Feel like
All
we
right.
do, yeah.
Well, that's all.
Okay, I will still make the motion. I move to appoint Bernard Lynch of 451 Central Avenue, Nancy Bersani of 40 Highland Street, Marianne Sullivan of 10 Walnut Street, Mark Williams of 114 Elm Street, Thomas McCarthy of 629 Randolph Avenue, Walter McDermott of 95 Clapp Street, Joseph Prondak of 525 Canton Avenue, William Ritchie of 525 Canton Avenue, Rob Mallett of 525 Canton Avenue, Michael Lynch of 451 Central Avenue, Brian Linehan of 515 Canton Avenue, Carolyn Kinsella of 525 Canton Avenue, John King of 40 Highland Street, Paul Hopkins of 87 Maher Avenue, Jay Hackett of 170 Center Street, Christopher Grazioso, 111 Brook Road.
Quincy,
Quincy?
yeah, that's felony.
Oh, okay, okay. John Grant of 515 Canton Avenue, Margaret Gibbons at 25 Gala Road, Paige Ippolito, 525 Canton Avenue, Michael Dennehy of 525 Canton Avenue, William Clark of 525 Canton Avenue, Declan Carberry of 199 Reeds Hill Road, John Fleming of 47 Melbourne Road, Charles Caputo of 40 Highland Street, to the Local Emergency Planning Committee to serve through June 2019.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Okay. Item 16, did we vote this, or did we, we just noted
15.
it, so we need, excuse me, item 15, Board Committees Master Plan Implementation Committee. So these are also reappointments, correct? Are they all reappointments, Kate?
Yes.
Everyone, all reappointments?
I move to appoint Elizabeth Miller of 15 Cape Cod Lane, Richard S. Burke of 617 Pleasant Street, Tabor Keeley of 674 Brush Hill Road, Cheryl Tagayas of 660 Canton Avenue, and Kathleen M. Conlon of 42 Reedsdale Road to the Master Plan Implementation Committee to serve through July 2018.
I think that should be July 2019,
I
correct?
was going to say, that
Yeah.
doesn't sound right, because that's,
I was going to say, you just all got dismissed.
do I have to read it all over?
No, I think just.
Thank you. Amend that to serve through July 2019.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That is unanimous. Item 16, and I propose we're going to amend this to, I would insert before my name Michael Zulus as the voting member, and I would serve as the non-voting member. Strike out the word boards and liaison to the youth task force. Is that all right?
So I'm happy to offer that motion, as you just said, Richard, then too.
Okay.
I'll move that we appoint,
Pardon, before we do,
I'm
I
sorry.
just had a couple questions, because I'm still a little confused on this, in terms of the number of people that are on it, and if we've determined exactly whom will be on this
Yeah.
task force? Have
We
we?
voted that
Yeah.
already. We did
Yeah.
that a while ago.
Everyone?
Everyone.
Except
Okay.
the names here.
Except for Jennifer Goddard.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. Because one thing I just would like to potentially mention is Jeff Marr, who many of us know, and I haven't spoken to Jeff, so I don't even know if he's interested. But to the extent that there is somebody that's unable to be a part of this, I think Jeff and his experience with the Dorchester Boys and Girls Club would bring a lot of value to this task force. And, you know, we could, I just wanted to get it in the record so that it's on everyone's radar and we can, you know, have them on the bench, so to speak.
You better call him, too.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
brought it
I
up,
have a
you
feeling I
better
might
call
be
him.
in, I might be in trouble, but
better call
I really do think that he, you know, he's operated and been a part of the decision-making process of the Dorchester Boys and Girls Club for, you know, a number of years. And he could, I think, bring a lot of, like I said, value and insight into this. So I'd love to have him involved in some way, shape, or form, even if it's not, you know, official.
Great.
Thank you, Chief.
All right, good.
All right, so I'll move that we appoint Jennifer Goddard of 27 Revere Street, Michael Zulus as the board's voting member, and Richard G. Wells Jr. as the board's non-voting member to the Youth Task Force.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, it's unanimous. Mr. Town Administrator, we are to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Some good news from a financial perspective. Last Friday, S&P Global Ratings assigned its AAA rating to Milton, Mass. Again. And today, $11,020,000 general obligation bonds went for a sale. The lowest bidder was Janney Montgomery Scott LLC at 2.616384%, which is a very good rate. The treasurer had sent around some paperwork today of other communities with AAA bond ratings, and we were significantly lower than 90% of those. So a credit to all the teams in town, but especially the financial teams that are working behind the scenes. This board, warrant committee, town meeting members, I inherited a very prudent and tedious task group that works through annual budgets, and they've done a very good job. And I always was taught that hardest part of getting a AAA rating is sustaining it, and this is the third year that the town has sustained this, so credit to everyone. And those $11 million worth of bonds will be at this board next Monday.
If I could just make a suggestion, Mike, that's real money that the town is saving because of those ratings. And maybe for town meeting, we could give town meeting a sense of how much money is saved because of that high rating, because of that
Certainly,
AAA
yeah.
rating.
So Brianne Cecil, who works for Unibank, who's our consultant on this, is putting together some stuff specific to that, but I think that's a great idea, Vice Chair. It's real money. It's money going out the doors in other communities that can be spent on other things in the town, so kudos to everybody with that. And Treasurer McAuliffe will be here next week to solidify that. Just a couple of issues. The fall street tree planting is going to be underway soon. I know that it's very hot and humid right now. I did accept one a month ago, and I'm watering it every day, which should be watered every other week, but I like it. It looks great. The kids love it, but they are looking for locations around town. Shade Tree Advisory Committee did a lot of work last year, walking the streets and identifying what I found to be a traumatic number of street trees that we're losing. So the fall street tree planting season will get underway soon. I ask that you reach out to Public Works, 617-898-4900 with a location for street trees. What they'll do is come out and inspect the site and see what wires are overhanging and pick the proper tree species for that location. So that's underway. Selectwoman Collins had been talking about water meter replacements and the lack of knowledge for people in the community. Basically, the water meters in the town have outlived their useful life. So they are currently in the process of phase one. It's a 3-year phase in. Again, if you want your water meter replaced sooner rather than later, and you're on the East Milton side of things, that's phase one. Call the office and talk to Chase, one of the wonderful people at 629 Randolph Ave, to get on that list. Again, that's 617-898-4900. These meters are very up to date. Fortunately, many members of our community don't get notified that they have a leak somewhere. These meters give the town the ability to notify people a lot quicker than your quarterly bill or your monthly notification. So it's a proactive way to stop leaks in our community. So this is, that project is undergoing. I think the only other thing I have tonight is National Night Out. Meet the Milton Police Department Community Cookout is Wednesday night at the police station from 5:30 to 8:30. It's a great family night, great community event. Looks like the weather is gonna hold off. It's gonna be hot and steamy, and I think last year they had to dunk the police officer tank, so.
They're having it again, I heard.
Okay, yeah. And all the people that donate stuff, the sausage guy and people like that are down there, it's a great night, so. That's this Wednesday, 5:30 to 8:30 at police headquarters.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just have a couple things. Just, I may have touched base on this. I've met with the fire station building committee. I think that they will have an article ready for whether we do it in January or February, looking for the initial monies for design. I think they'll have an idea as to where they want to go. East Milton is the big hang-up right now, but they've kind of set what they want to do at Engine 4. They have a proposal here. The one thing I do have, and I haven't talked, Brian Walsh has been great, their chair. All the members have been great. I was there the other night just briefly. I do know that it appears to be that in headquarters they're looking, I know they're discussing both ways, but one of them does involve building a brand-new facility to the left here in some of the town-owned parcel land there. The one thing I think we need to do is, it appears between, this is the third, at least in my year and a half here, so this is the third time that this lot has been brought up, this parcel of land next to the town park, it's been brought up by the schools. It's been brought up as a site for potential teen center, and now a site for potential fire station. I don't know whether this is something we could ask John Thompson to do, or the planning office, but I'd like to at least look at this entire parcel of land so that if it is determined that we are going to need to use this for something, that we maximize the space, and if it can be able to provide amenities for more than one department. In other words, that if we're gonna use this whole, can we carve out a spot where if one day comes that we could enlarge the council on aging and make it an intergenerational center, that we include that. I think that I've had just brief conversations with Dr. Donahue just about the school's needs. One thought is, could we perhaps build one central ECC, Early Childhood Center, that all the schools, and that would really take a lot of pressure long-term off of the existing elementaries, but it would also be one central place in town where all these needs could be met. So I think that it's just my thought, listening to them when they do make discussion, I think that what I'm going to say at their next meeting is exactly what I'm saying to you, is that even if you are thinking this way, I need you to know from our perspective that this parcel of land may need to be diversified a little bit. And I'm not even so sure how the process would be if someone, is that on the park department, or is that on the board? The
Board of Selectmen.
This whole parcel of land right here is on it. So I just think that we need to look at this, and I'd like to at least ask Mr. Denny to have Mr. Thompson look at it and just see, what's the maximum use we could get out of it? What could we, if you did have what else could you put there? I think it's just as our obligations on this board as the chief, financial people and executive board, I think we need to look at that. Okay, because all three of those are on our, could be, we know the financial aspect, and I'm probably talking about some of these could be 10 years away, but I think we need to, there aren't a lot of parcels of land left in this town that are under our jurisdiction that we're going to be able to. So that's, I do want to thank the planning board chair, Cheryl Tagayas. She and I had a very introductory but a productive meeting the other morning with Peter Dunn and Steve Rhines from East Milton Neighborhood Association, just about the whole Falcone proposal. I'm sure all of you have gotten the emails, as I have, in the past week. And we've agreed continue this. If anyone's watched the last planning, I believe it was their last planning board meeting, their chair, Charles Agaius, who was a very bright woman, has talked about inclusiveness in a way going forward on this. I think that without dialogue, I just don't know how we can get there on either side. And I thank them all for the time they put in on this. And I think that Charles away, but I think when she comes back, they're going to try and, as we talked about earlier, try to formalize this and create a working group. The only other thing is, I think maybe another retreat might be in order, maybe September. I don't know if we talked about this, but I did make a note about it. Time is flying. October's going to be here before we know it. So if anyone could just kind of think on their calendars what works good. I won't pick a Labor Day weekend, but maybe one more. I'm sure President Quigley would love to have us back at Curry. That seemed to work well for us. And then the last thing is, just as like a point on it, I know that Mr. Farrington has brought this to our agenda. And National Grid is going to be coming back next week, but this is obviously becoming a prolonged situation. And as I say, it will be winter before we know it. Whether anyone understands this or not, there is no service being done in this community right now. One story that was relayed to me today, I don't know whether it's Everett or Revere. They have a brand new school that's it's been completely rehabbed, that is going to natural gas heat, that needs to open in September, and because of this, they have no heating system. So I've heard from one resident who lives up on the Brush Hill neighborhood who needs like 60 feet, and they've been waiting and waiting and waiting to get gas into the house, and it's not going to happen. So I think from both sides, both from the union side and the side that we represent customers here who count on natural gas, I mean, all of our buildings. I mean, we've converted every town building to natural gas, where we're all. I think we need to be cognizant of that, all of us, and I know that they're coming back in on the 13th, correct?
That's right. Yeah, Jamie, I spoke with him yesterday, and he does plan on attending. I don't know if he has any remarks prepared, but he is planning on attending. And I will, I've drafted a letter, and I will circulate that letter tomorrow, or have Mike circulate it, rather, just so you're aware of the content of the letter, you're familiar with it. And hopefully we can vote to submit that next week.
Okay. That's it. Mr. Zulus.
I have nothing to report.
Mrs. Collins?
Nothing to report.
I have a couple things. Actually, this will probably be a combination of maybe members, citizen speaker response, future agenda items. The first thing, sort of dovetailing, Richard, with what you just said, the National Grid. So that will be on the agenda next week. I would like to thank Chase Berkeley and Town Administrator Michael Dennehy on their wonderful work with the solar flashing stop signs, 7 of which were installed this week. They're a huge hit. People in the neighborhood, throughout the town, neighborhoods rather, throughout the town of Milton, as we know, are very, very concerned about traffic. I learned a new term this week, which was stoptional. People just roll through many of these stop signs, and these seem to have an effect. People notice them, and to the extent that it can slow traffic down, I think it's it's great, it's worthwhile, and we'll be getting 10 more, according to Mike. Is that right?
Yeah, we actually, we have $20,000. We may be getting 12, but yeah,
Okay.
that order went in today.
Okay, all right, great.
Thank you.
There's one other, well, a couple other things, but I came across this wonderful program that I saw today in the Patriot Ledger. Many of you may have already seen it as well. Richard, you're probably very familiar with it, Coffee with a Cop.
Oh, yeah.
It's a national program. They just put it in place over in Quincy. It's the first I heard of it. I had reached out to someone in the police force, and they told me, the police department, they had told me it's a national program. And I was just thinking, I know it's Chief King's decision, but to the extent that we could maybe begin a dialogue surrounding that. Frankly, I think community relations between the town and the department are wonderful, but it couldn't hurt to explore that and potentially look into doing something like that in the fall, September, October, November. I just think it would be a great program. And it strikes me as being pretty cost-effective, too. Price of a cup of coffee. The other thing, too, lastly, just to sort of comment on the whole select board issue, the political lesson that I learned in the last couple of weeks, what I've discovered here is that I think as electeds, we all do our best to try to speak to as many people as we can in a community, people that we don't normally encounter in our day-to-day life. And sometimes people use the word ecosystem or echo chamber or world or orbit or whatever it might be. And when Mike first proposed this, this was completely new to me because frankly, the people that I deal with on a day-to-day basis, the people that I speak to, the people that I interact with, they never talk about this. They never bring it up. And I thought I was doing a wonderful job of engaging with voters and constituents and friends and neighbors here in Milton. And it turns out, frankly, I wasn't. If I did, I would know more about this. And I didn't really want to bring it up as we were discussing it in an agenda item because I wanted to move things along. But the takeaway for me in all of this is I need to do a better job of doing that. And if I was doing a better job, perhaps I would, I'd be more cognizant of it. But the last thing I will say on it, when we were having this discussion 2 weeks ago, in the days subsequent to that discussion, one of the criticisms that was brought forth was that Richard's suggestion was obstructionist. And I didn't agree with it then, and I don't agree with it now. One person's interpretation might be that that is obstructionist. That's an opinion. That individual is certainly entitled to it. But another person could interpret that as being very thorough. And I think that that letter from the Attorney General's office to the town of Hull is illustrative of that. Because if this had gone off or continued along the path that it was, and it had gotten to town meeting, and it had been passed, there's a strong, strong likelihood that once it got to the Attorney General's office, which is the part of the process where it's a mere formality, that it would have been kicked back to the town of Milton. So I think that's where thoroughness really plays a big part in a process like this. And so I think that, you know, that's important to keep in mind. It's important to consider because the town of Hull did do this, and by all accounts it was a success, but at the 11th hour, just when it's supposed to be rubber stamped by the AG, it was kicked out and the process had to begin again. So I think there's something to be said for vetting and for thoroughness and for study, which is what we've done in the last 2 weeks. And I think that we've all arrived at a very reasonable resolution, which town meeting will take up in October. So that's all I have. Thank you for your time. Sorry if that was a little long-winded.
Ms. Conlon?
I have no report.
Okay, so hearing that, do we have any citizen speak response? I mean, I think we've said, does anyone else have an estimate? Okay. Future agenda items.
I just have one.
Good.
I need to be appointed to the Affordable Housing Trust so that I can vote.
You didn't do that yet?
I don't think so.
Can we put that on for Thursday, for 13th, Monday?
Great.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
I have a bunch.
Go ahead.
So National Grid,
Yeah,
Falcone, I think, was coming in.
yeah, Valcone's coming in on Monday.
Yep,
Yeah.
and then 131 Elliott.
He needs a vote of us on this, correct?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Well, he needs a vote of the Board of Appeals, but he's looking for support
All right, I get
for
that.
the height,
It's 3 feet.
minor height change.
Yeah.
3 feet?
Municipal broadband RFP, which town council was working on until we threw a lot of stuff on him late last week. I think we need to make the traffic commission appointments that were suggested to the
Right.
previous board. I think there's 2 vacancies right now for residents that was passed at town meeting in last October.
Yeah, and Mike, on that point, the prior board got a number of
have one,
applications.
yeah.
Right.
Richard and I have seen the applications, the others probably have not.
disseminate those,
So
yeah.
we should share those, but I think, Richard, correct me if I'm wrong, weren't we sending them to Chase or to John King to vet for us a little bit?
I think we
To see
did
what
that.
expertise
I
they might
I think we did that.
recommend?
Because one of them
I
definitely.
think you had suggested it,
Yeah,
so.
one of them definitely brought a great deal of expertise in public transit, and I thought she was very good. Okay, so you're good with that?
Yep, and the town treasurer will be here for the bond sale stuff.
Okay.
And Chase is coming back for FY19 water and sewer rate discussion with, geez, I don't know Toby's last name, but he works for Woodard and Curran, he's our consultant.
Can we too, I just want to, goes back, and I have a note on this. Can we set maybe for the 27th, if not the first meeting in September, to invite in the Affordable Housing Trust to one of our meetings? We had talked about that. I really think we need to start having additional discussions. I know Melinda's worked a lot on this.
Well, I think we should wait until September because they haven't really been meeting.
Okay, so that's fine. I just want to keep
Yeah,
it
but that's
on the radar, so
Yeah.
I'm fine with that. I'll be,
And on the 27th, John Flynn is coming in, well, actually, for the trust side of
Okay.
Governor Stoughton, and Tom Hurley for the 4 acres. So
Okay.
I think we can do that first.
Is
Go
that,
ahead.
mean, the affordable housing meeting?
No, here,
to us, on the
on the
27th.
Okay, 'cause-
27th.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that, but that's good, because I happen to notice that the planning board had Pulte Homes in at their last meeting, talking about building their off-site, their affordable housing off-site. And we've had a number of discussions about the 4 acres and whether that's the right location for it. So I think the new board needs to take that up.
Right.
Okay.
And the
Right.
planning director and many people have had different discussions about that over the last couple of years.
Tom Hurley plans on attending as well. He's going to speak to his home rule petition that night, and will also join us to give his insight as to the experience he's had, both on the Affordable Housing Trust and as
You know, I think that's a good thing. I
Yeah.
thought we should
Yeah,
include
yeah.
Tom in it, but we have to have a discussion
Mhm.
among ourselves about
Absolutely.
Right, and
whether Pulte or the Carberry or any of the others, whether this is, the Governor Stoughton acres are the right location for
Mhm,
that,
mhm.
for them to utilize for their affordable housing units.
And as part of that discussion, I'm not sure what Tom's going to present to us. But there have been past appraisals done, and there are highest and best use sections. So if people, I haven't been able to find them on the website, but that doesn't mean anything. That just means that I couldn't find them. But if I can't find them, I'll ask Bill Clark if we can get a copy.
Maybe even the assessor's office.
Oh,
Maybe
okay.
The assessor's office might have it.
Okay.
I have one more, Mr. Chair.
Go
Traffic
ahead.
Mitigation Committee for the
Okay.
13th, if we
The
could.
13th?
Yeah.
Okay. That's you, correct?
Yeah, we discussed that,
Okay.
but we wanted to get your input.
I'm fine, okay. Anything else before we go into executive session? So, if someone, I'm gonna make a motion, does it needs to be me? Yeah, I'm gonna make a motion to enter an executive session for the purpose of discussing strategy with respect to non-union personnel and to comply with or act under the authority of any general or special law or federal grant and aid requirements, and to re-enter open session specifically for the purpose to adjourn.
Can I offer a friendly amendment? Because I think
Sure.
you just have to say the information in those
I do?
parentheticals
I
for
do?
the,
Okay.
for the public's benefit.
So the first one is an update on department head contract negotiations, and the second one is the approval of executive session meeting minutes.
Second.
Gotcha.
Aye.
Aye,
Roll call. Mr. Zulus?
Aye.
aye.
Yes. Mr. Farrington?
Aye.
Ms. Collins? Mrs. Collins, yes.
Aye.
We are in executive session.